Hello, everybody. Pastor Bob here with our Between the Lines podcast. We haven't done this for a few weeks, but we've got a lot of questions that we want to make sure that we are answering for you all. So Jason and I thought we'd put together this session where we answer some frequently asked questions about what's happening with the coronavirus, with the church, with worship, and a whole host of other things. So Jason, you are here. Good morning.
Good morning, Bob. Good to be here.
And to begin with, I think it'd be great for you to kind of tell people, some people have asked, we haven't seen Jason at worship. So do you want to give them just a little bit of a synopsis about what's going on with you, as much as you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say I hate watching worship from home. Every time I see you guys out there and not being out there with you just takes a little piece of me away to have to do that on Sunday morning. But I've been dealing with some health issues that have been going on. And as you look at the criteria that put you at high risk, I basically meet 4 of those criteria at that point. And so we've talked with my doctor a little bit about sort of what her recommendations and guidelines are. And she's wanted me to play it pretty conservatively. And so when I pitched to her the idea of participating in the outdoor worship, and it's like, well, it's going to be outside. And I actually thought that she would give me the thumbs up for that. But she just wasn't real big on it. And so I've been playing more of a behind-the-scenes role, helping with a little bit of the worship planning and preparation and stuff like that. And then doing some other duties that I've been able to sort of rekindle some of those accounting gifts and help with some of those projects at the church. So it's been more of a behind the scenes for me focus, which has been fun. I do enjoy some of that stuff, but I also certainly miss preaching and being out there with everybody.
And this is not a permanent deal. At some point, you'll be able to be back with us again in person, and all shall be well.
Yes, absolutely. And I long for that day, believe me.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people kind of understood that, because, and if they do see you, to make sure that they keep distance and wear a mask and things like that, so that there's an opportunity to keep you healthy, because we need to do that for sure. So we wanted to get into some questions about stuff going on with worship and what's happening with church, because we've been in this for a few weeks now, and some folks have had some questions. So I put together a list of questions, some frequently asked questions that I've received. I know you've received a few others. So let's start with kind of where things are with the state guidelines, because some churches have gone back in person, some have not. Some are meeting outdoors like us. You've been following this pretty closely, Jason. You've kind of been our point person with the governor's task force that's been working on this. So what are the current state guidelines for churches? How do they stand at this moment on July 22nd?
Yeah. So the truth is there hasn't been much movement in the guidelines since the month of June. They've been pretty static for churches. They did want, they recognize the importance of the faith communities and the role that we play in people's lives, and the need for us to get together. Just as businesses need to be open to bring in revenue, churches need to be able to have some means of gathering together to help people with their spiritual and emotional needs. And so they've tried to make some concessions for that. Part of the limitations that we really run into is how many people we can gather together safely indoors. And so the governor has on his website a little square footage calculator, and you go in and you put in the square footage of your space, and it spits out a number and says, this is how many people you can have meet in this room. And so we put that in for our great room, or for our sanctuary, and it came out with 23 people that could. The first time I put it in, it was 23. When I was messing with it the other day, it was 22. I was hoping it would be, something else, but anyway, so it's really limited. I think we can add about another 15 or so out in the great room if we were to sort of expand things out there. But I mean, you're looking at a total of 40 max that we could have in an indoor service according to state guidelines. And then you start thinking about all the cleaning that would have to happen. So if we average 350 on a Sunday or so, that's a lot of services to get in at 40 people at a shot. And then to do all the cleaning that's required in between services, you have to have entrance and exits plans. And so that's why as we really wrestled with this, decided to just go with the outdoor option. It's safer, it's easier, and just a lot more practical for us to be able to do.
Well, not only that, you have to be 100% masked. Everyone has to be masked.
Yep.
And you can't really sing or do any verbal responses. So it would be a very quiet worship service indoors, even for us who would be preaching. I think we're supposed to be masked as well. I mean, I think you can take it off while you're preaching, but then you have to have sort of a 25-foot
25 feet, yeah, between you and the first person.
Because I know I get fired up and spit and things like that, but there is this.
Oh, no, I usually sit in the front row. It's the splash zone.
It's like you got to wear a raincoat or something. But there is a real. It's a deficit for us. We can't really do anything that looks like worship. We couldn't really do communion indoors effectively. And so there are so many more things that we can do outdoors than we can do indoors. We can sing outdoors. We can distribute communion more readily.
Yep.
And serve it more readily because people can be in their cars or be distant from one another, and it's not really limited. I mean, we've not pushed the limits of our capacity at this point for outdoor worship. So there's plenty of space to do that. So that answers the second question, I think, which is why are we not worshiping in the building? I mean, some churches are doing that, but a lot of churches don't have any other option.
Yeah.
And if you're a smaller church, if you're a smaller church, say you have 100 members, maybe you worship 100 on a Sunday, you might be able to do that where you can get a chunk of your people in there, do a worship service, maybe have two, but you've got to clean every hard surface in between every service. So if you do multiple services, then you're talking about the manpower that's needed for cleaning. You've got to do all the mask enforcement. You've got to do a bunch of other stuff. And you're still talking about no singing, no kids programs, no nothing really except kind of preaching and listening. You'd sit there silently and not really be able to connect with one another. And so when we looked at that, we said, we've invested a lot in being able to do what we can do. And fortunately, we have the space, and our trustees have done a tremendous job putting together the logistics for us to be able to do outdoor worship. And that's working extremely well. We've kind of got it down to a science now where we can set it up. It doesn't take an hour and a half to set up anymore. Sam's done a tremendous job getting all of that organized. And so it's working very well, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and I think, we've been able on the communion front to deliver communion to those, some folks are, choosing to stay at home, especially those that are in that high risk category for whatever reason. And so we've been able to extend the table to them on Sunday mornings. And I just want to take a moment during this podcast to thank all those folks who have volunteered to make that happen, and to extend the table and to deliver to those people that aren't able to get out with us right now. And I know you just did, but I sat in on my first trustees meeting this last week, and the amount of work that team does for our congregation is just really extraordinary. And then what they've done to step up and make this possible. If you see one of our trustees at any point, or know who they are, send them a note and thank them. Scott McCready's our chair. He's done a great job. And I'm just really grateful for what they've done to help us out.
Yeah, we've had, Ricky Swanson here early on Sunday morning, who's marking parking spaces and putting out signs, and Alan Wright's been out here working on parking lot issues, and we've just had a tremendous response to all this stuff. And so a lot of stuff is getting done in the background that people don't see.
Yep.
And we want to make sure that we've got, and even like Karen Craig shows up when there's a fire alarm, and, we've had alarm issues. And so there's been a lot of stuff going on that we've been able to mitigate because we've got a really great trustee team at this point.
And helping with security after what happened to the altar, to get some more measures out there to deter those kind of things from happening.
Right, exactly. So, so some have asked then the question, as we've been talking about outdoor worship, what's been the response to outdoor worship? And the response has been really good. I mean, obviously there's some things you can't control. Like 2 weeks ago, we had 35-mile-an-hour winds. So we still were outside. Amazingly, because of the work that Sam has done and others have done, we did a lot with the microphones to make sure that we did not have excessive wind coming through the sound system. And if you're watching on the live stream, you can see that really well. Our district superintendent was actually here that Sunday, drove in with his family and was in the back and said he was amazed at how little they could hear the wind, even though it was howling outside. Mm-hmm. But we've had really good response. I mean, we've been anywhere between 100 to 150 people, anywhere between 40 to 60 cars here on a Sunday morning, and people spaced out. Some people sitting on the grass. Some people simply tailgating. It's been fun to see the different configurations. People back their pickup trucks and they sit in the back of the pickup truck, or they open the tailgate and the kids snuggle in and they've got their blankets, or they've got their snacks there, or people are popping the tailgate or the hatch from their hatchback and putting out their lawn chairs, and maybe have a sun umbrella there. It's been kind of fun to see how everyone's been doing that. So, but we still have the majority of folks who are connecting with us on Sunday are connecting with us online. Yeah. So we do have quite a lot of folks who are staying home, who are vulnerable. And we do deliver communion to those who request it. After the service, we make sure that we consecrate the correct number of we call them communion pods, which makes them sort of like Tide Pods, but that's probably the best way to describe them. And some have remarked about, well, these wafers taste like, styrofoam. Yeah, they do. But this is what we can do. And all I can say is, if you really want to taste what styrofoam tastes like, come up and try the big wafer that I use for breaking on Sunday morning. It's not terribly tasty. I crush it up and I scatter it after the worship service up there. And there are holes up there, where there are animals clearly living up there. I'm not sure they even touch it, but at this point, it is what we can do. And I look forward to the day when we can have actual bread again, and do some things like that. But at least we're able to share in the sacrament. And again, it's not so much about how it tastes and all of that. It's a reminder, this tangible reminder and tangible sign of God's grace given to us. So I'm glad we're able to do that. But we've had consistently on Sundays, Sam and I ran the numbers this week, and we've consistently had 350 or more who have joined us on Sunday morning, a combination of in person and online. And that's really good for us in the summer, because usually in the summers, we've been under 200 in actual attendance. And we've had maybe 30, 40 people watching online before. But now a lot of people have transitioned to online and are watching us online. And that's worked very, very well. It's not the same. We know that. I've had a number of people say to me, it's difficult for us to watch. We got little kids and it's hard to keep them in one place. But I also reminded them, that they're recorded so you can watch them at any time. There are options for you to do that. Again, none of this is ideal, right? None of this is what we want to do, but this is what we can do at this point. And our people have been really resilient, really supportive. We've gotten some really great feedback and helpful feedback, but also just encouragement. I'm just so blessed. I feel so blessed, serving a congregation that has rolled with the punches with this so easily and is adaptable. So we're thankful to all of you for your patience as we try to navigate this. This is not something any of us have ever been through before. And yet we're thriving. and we're doing very well in a lot of different ways. So that's been really good.
Yeah, when we were at Asbury, they didn't offer a servant as pandemic leader.
Right.
You know, when Bob and I were at Asbury, they had these core classes, you know, servant as leader, servant as proclaimer, servant as, I don't know, all these other classes. And so Bob and I joke about that sometimes. But yeah, I think they need to add servant as pandemic leader to their curriculum at this point.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. And I think this is a subject for another podcast down the road, but how church will change as a result of this. I'm actually going to preach on that a little bit on Sunday, and thinking about post-pandemic, because there will be a post-pandemic. It's hard to see it in the midst of it, but the end is in sight. I think, you know, you can start to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not an oncoming train, but
Right.
But there is a sense that, you know, at some point, you know, we're going to have vaccine, we're going to have treatments, you know, this is, and pandemics naturally burn out at some point anyway. So we just have to be patient and continue to work the process and keep people safe and look out for one another, which people are clearly doing. So, so we're very proud of you as your pastors. If you're listening to this, we're very proud of our congregation. I brag about you all the time when I talk to others, because other churches are in deep conflict or they have a lot of issues around this, but we've done exceptionally well in the midst of it. Thanks to your prayers and your input and your engagement. We continue to do weekday morning prayer, which has also been a wonderful thing that's been added during this time. You know, I don't know how many people we have doing that now, but it's probably 15 to 20 every day who are online with us to share in morning prayer. That's been a great discipline. That's one of those things I think we'll probably wind up carrying through after this is all done. And because I think it's been a great point of connection. One of the other questions we've gotten then is, go ahead.
I was just going to add about, I mean, I do think, you know, as you said, this isn't ideal, but I think there is some fruitful ministry that's coming out of this. And I think about people we hear from that are looking for engagement, have connected with us online far beyond, you know, our local area, going into other states and even around the country. And so I know people engage us in morning prayer from other states and stuff like that. And, you know, even if they don't catch it right then, it gets posted on Facebook and they're able to engage that later. And so I think that it's been, you know, it's been helpful and a good ministry and a good expansion of what we've been able to do.
We've extended the reach of our congregation significantly over the course of these last few months, and been exposed to a lot more people who may never have even known about Tri-Lakes. So it's exciting to see how that's happened. Now, one of the other questions then that kind of goes, this has been great for the summer. What happens when the weather turns cold, which it could do next week?
Right.
Probably not, but certainly sometime in September or October, we're going to have nice days, but it's also going to get cooler eventually. What do we do at that point? That's been a question. And that's the question that we've been wrestling with. And the question is, you know, as long as the guidelines remain as they are, again, it's very difficult for us to move back into the building and do anything that resembles worship.
Yeah.
Now, we may be able to do some weekday prayer services or smaller services to get people connected, to be able to share in the sacrament throughout. And so inviting people to maybe sign up for a period of time over the course of the month where they come one time during the month and receive. But in terms of doing a full-blown worship service, that's going to be really difficult for us to do. So we'll probably transition back to Sunday mornings primarily being online, again, offering some other options for people to come if they feel comfortable doing so. And I think there are a lot of people who are simply saying, I'm going to wait, you know, to do that, which is fine. Yep. We encourage that actually. But also perhaps thinking creatively about this and saying that maybe instead of watching the service by yourself at home, if you feel comfortable doing so, maybe you want to kind of establish a little house church community where maybe you get a couple different families together, appropriate social distancing, masking, whatever it is. but watching the worship service together. And you may or may not know this. We publish a devotional guide every week that's based on the readings for the week, but also based on the sermon for each week. So if you watch the sermon, if you're watching worship together, there are discussion questions that you can use afterwards with a small group or with your family or with whoever you're with. So it's a tremendous opportunity to kind of to build a little bit of community, maybe a micro community, while we wait for the time when we can be back in the larger community.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful tool that we provide. And also, if you're, I think a lot of people are sort of looking for ways to engage spiritual disciplines at this point. And if that's you, if you've kind of felt that tug on your heart that you want to engage in a more regular spiritual practice, that's a great, simple starting place to begin with. There's a daily prayer, questions for you to journal. You can use those questions in a group setting, but we also try to word them in such a way that you could just answer them yourself in your own journal. And then there's, specific things to pray for. And so, yeah, we would encourage you to, others, if you're interested, to just avail yourselves of that tool that's out there.
We've also got some online educational opportunities coming up. Do you want to describe the two that you're working on? Then I'll describe the one I'm preparing for September.
Yeah. So the big one is coming up in the month of August. We're going to have a 4-week study on Wednesday evenings on compassionate communication. And we are really blessed to have Pam Engelbert, Dr. Pam Engelbert, who is part of our TLUMC church family. She and her husband, Lincoln, started attending our church, I believe a little over a year ago, I guess a year and a half now at this point. And Pam holds her PhD in the field of practical theology. And she focused on this topic of compassionate communication. And Bob, I know you and I had a meeting with Pam, towards the end of 2019, maybe in the fall sometime. And we invited her to come share a little bit during our leadership retreat about compassionate communication. And so we're going to continue with that and take a little bit deeper dive in the month of August. And so that'll be Wednesday evenings from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's going to be a little more interactive. We are going to do it online via Zoom in order to encourage people to participate. And I already know some folks from outside the state that are going to participate in this with us. So that's another great way that we can expand our ministry. But in this time where we're just having trouble talking with each other right now, about all kinds of things, from politics to, I think, just in our families, our relationships, and our marriages, we're just struggling to communicate well. And so this is going to be a great tool for people to gain some skills to just communicate in a more respectful and understanding way. And I'm also very excited. We've had a couple of families sign up for it. And so, this is the kind of thing that can benefit everyone. And so I'm really excited. I'm grateful for Pam that she's willing to lead this. And I'm excited for that coming up in August.
And then you have another conversation you're planning on race, correct?
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to talk more about. We don't have that one mapped out quite just yet. We know that that's a contentious topic for many people, but it's one that we need to talk about. And if we can't talk about that kind of thing in the church and how our faith informs our understanding of race relations, then something is wrong. And so we want to begin to offer some opportunities to have those discussions. And we're thinking about entering into that probably, via stories of some sort, reading some stories about how racism has affected our Black brothers and sisters in our country throughout history, and beginning to look how they're still impacted and influenced today, and how can we respond with faithfulness and compassion, and being part of the solution and not part of the problem on this difficult issue.
So that's a potential down the road. We're still working on that, but I think it's a great opportunity to have that conversation. I'm also planning something a little different for the fall, a Wednesday night experience um, that I'm calling Wednesdays with Wesley. So this is totally a Methodist kind of thing. And one of the things I've discovered as I've been doing a lot of research and reading this summer is really getting back into the richness of Wesley's sermons. You might know that John Wesley's 44 standard sermons were part of kind of the doctrinal and practical foundation for the early Methodist movement. And they're still part of our theological heritage today. We still reference John Wesley's sermons. We still talk about them. But my guess is that most people have never really read John Wesley's sermons. They've heard them quoted. They've certainly heard them quoted from us over periods of the last several years. Also, a lot of preachers have read pieces of Wesley, and Wesley is widely misquoted, just like the scriptures. You can take a Wesley quote and blow it out of context. But the sermons are really structured in a way that they are theological. There's a set of sermons that Wesley gives on how to become a Christian. There's a set of sermons that he does largely based on the Sermon on the Mount, which is how to live as a Christian. And then there's another set of sermons on the challenges of the Christian life. So what we want to do on Wednesdays with Wesley is give people an opportunity to be exposed to these sermons of John Wesley, and at the same time to be exposed to the real basics and nuances of Wesleyan theology. Who are we? What are we about? And I think that's really important in this time, when we're kind of in this state of flux in so many ways, culturally, denominationally, in so many different ways, for us to kind of say, what do we mean when we say that we're Methodists? What do we mean that when we say that we're Wesleyans? And to get that straight from Wesley. So the way we're going to structure Wednesdays with Wesley, and we're going to start this in September. I think September 2nd is when we've targeted the date. We're going to take a different sermon of John Wesley. We're not going to do all 44, but we are going to do 16 that I picked out over the course of the fall. And each Wednesday, we'll take one of those sermons. We'll give you a chance to kind of read it in advance, and that will give you a chance to kind of hone your reading of 18th century English, which is a bit of a challenge, but you'll get used to it. And then I will spend a half hour or so talking about what Wesley's saying, kind of what's the distillation of what Wesley's talking about. How would we talk about this in the 21st century? And then we're going to divide people into online small groups that they'll kind of continue through the course of this experience, where they'll be able to talk together about how they respond to these sermons and how these different concepts have impacted their lives, or what they might do differently as a result of knowing this. So starting with things like the image of God, and talking about grace, and talking about really sort of the essence of Wesleyan theology, which is sanctification. How do I become more like Jesus? That's really sort of the number one thing that is being focused on here. So it's an opportunity to learn about Wesley's sermons, an opportunity to have a small group experience, an opportunity to ask questions, an opportunity to kind of look ahead and to understand more deeply who we are. So I think of this a little bit like a disciple Bible study, or like a Christian believer study, where we're just simply diving into these particular texts and these particular sermons. It's interesting. I mean, I grew up Presbyterian. We had the catechism we learned, and I think we need a catechism as well in Methodism. But Wesley's theology ultimately was to be preached and to be proclaimed. He believed that that's what the gospel was about. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of get into that and hear his voice, and to hear the voice of Methodism over time about what we believe, how we live, and how we deal with the challenges of living the Christian life.
I'm really excited about this opportunity, not only because it is good to actually engage the primary resources. I mean, any researcher will tell you it's always important to engage the primary resources. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Kevin Watson's done some really good articles about sayings of Wesley that are attributed to him, that he never actually said. And so, we're going to be able to get this information straight from the horse's mouth. I also love the way that it's designed, because it is going to be informational, but there is this transformational side of it too. So not only are we going to learn about the method, but we're also going to take some time to practice that method as a group as we go through this. And I don't want to move on too quickly here, but I want to maybe pose a question back to you here. So I think for many of us, as we before coronavirus hit, we were anticipating General Conference and this major denominational change, right? Most likely. And now that sort of the pause button has been hit on that, but that's still something that awaits us in the future. And I know for many of us, I'll say for myself included, my hope is that from this, a new expression of Wesleyanism, like true Wesleyanism, will emerge. And so I think that's another important aspect of this study, is to sort of ground us in our Wesleyan tradition as we think about what's next. And I know you've been working with the Wesleyan Covenant Association and been involved in these conversations. Would you want to just give us an update about kind of where things are at and what's next, and sort of where we're at in our denominational situation?
Yeah, things are kind of obviously at a standstill at the moment. General Conference has been rescheduled for late August 2021. I think August 29th is the date that General Conference will convene in Minneapolis, hopefully. Hopefully we're in a place where we can do that by then.
Right.
But I think, while it's disappointing, I think a lot of people on all sides of this wanted to have clarity and wanted to be able to make decisions about separation or what have you. I know some people in the church have expressed concerns in either way, whether we stay with the denomination, whether we move to a new expression. And so, it's disappointing on one level, but I'm increasingly seeing the gift in this time. And what I mean by that is that it's given us time to really consider what it is we want the future to look like. Whether I am someone who is really a traditional Methodist who sees a traditional expression, or someone who's more progressive, both sides of that house now have time to say, okay, we were going to make this decision. We were going to jump into these things, and then we were largely going to figure out what to do once we got there, right? Yeah. Now we have time to really think about what that's going to look like. And so when it comes to decision making, if we make a decision as a church, if we choose to do so in late 2021, early 2022, the church is going to have a very clear understanding of what it is they'd be moving toward if they move toward a new denomination, or what they'd be staying in if they stay in the post-separation United Methodist Church. So there's a lot more clarity coming around those options. I know, and full disclosure, as Jason said, I've been working with the Wesleyan Covenant Association. I've been working on the crafting of a new denomination for the last 4 years now. And but that does not preclude, and I say this all the time, this does not preclude where Tri-Lakes will go. I want Tri-Lakes to make its own decision. That's why we've been doing all these town hall meetings before coronavirus hit. Jen Filla and our Next Steps Task Force are doing a tremendous job making sure that people are getting all the information, all the facts. We kind of put that work on hold for now, but I suspect, come spring of 2021, we'll be back and refreshing people on where things are and inviting more conversations, more town hall meetings. I know we had one scheduled right as coronavirus hit, where we're going to have Kent Ingram come. Kent's a leading person sort of on the progressive centrist side here. He's a friend of mine. We were going to kind of have a two views kind of conversation. We've committed to continue to do that in the future as we move into this process. But I do think that there's an opportunity now for us to kind of say, let's think about who we want to be. Not so much about what do we not want to be, and let's get out of this conflict, but think about, what does the future look like? What does the future for a new denomination look like? What is the future for a change? Because look, here's the reality. No matter which place you choose, there's going to be change. There's going to be significant change. There was already going to be significant change, and coronavirus and the post-pandemic world is going to be significantly different for the church. Even as we think about things, as we think about what do gatherings look like? How does the emergence of this sort of online experience now, that brings up a whole new set of things. I mean, that was there before, but now, since we've only been able to do that, it really has brought us to a place of thinking about, gosh, how does that apply? What does church look like when we're in this virtual place? And, how do we connect? How do we do that? So there are a lot of unanswered questions. And this pause, I think, gives us a chance to kind of get our theological and practical ducks in a row, so that when people come to make decisions, it won't be making a decision into a future that's a question mark, but rather saying, this is the direction this place is going to go. This is the direction this side of the house is going to go. We now can make a very clear decision going down the road. So I think there's a lot of advantage in that too. I mean, I was really hoping, I had a whole travel schedule set up for the spring. I have tons of airline funds now that I have to find a place to use, and hopefully, as we get into next year, they'll still be valid, and I'll be able to use them for these meetings and things that are going on going forward. But I would just encourage people to kind of continue to lean in. I would really encourage you to think about being involved in, one, the compassionate communication thing, because I think that is going to be really critical. When we did that, when Pam came and did that for our leadership at our leadership retreat in January, it was tremendously helpful. And I think the more people we can have learning how to listen to one another, especially as we go through this process, that is going to be tremendously helpful. So I really encourage you to sign up for that. But I also encourage you to think about being part of Wednesdays with Wesley, because that will give you a real grounding. We give everybody we do the Reader's Digest version in our Blueprints class and our new member class. This will give you a chance to do a little bit of a deeper dive, at the same time thinking about, how does this apply to me? Yeah. So I think there's some new opportunities coming around for us to be able to do that. Any other questions you can think of, Jason, that people have been asking you, or things that we need to dive into? One question was just a practical one. How's our financial situation? The reality is our financial situation as a church is very strong. We're actually ahead of where we were last year at this time, which is pretty amazing. It's all due to the generosity of the people in our church. We've been able to maintain, we're continuing to pay our staff, and we continue to be able to be moving out in mission and funding the things that need to happen. So I'm hearing that from other pastors too, that even in the midst of this, it's been that's not been the challenge to this point. So we're thankful for that. We encourage you to keep giving generously. There are lots of ways to do that, online, through the mail, however you want to do that. But we want to thank you, and I thank everybody every Sunday for their generosity, because it's been truly amazing to see how that's happened. That's one question. Can you think of any others?
Yeah, no. I would just piggyback on that and say thank you as well, as the one who gets to be the primary liaison to our missions team. And I'm so thankful for Margie and all the work that she and others have put into this. We've been able to deliver gift baskets. We did a little gift basket ministry to people who are going through especially difficult time right now, and we got a tremendous response from them on that. Even some people who have not been engaged in church, and we took baskets to them, and they're kind of saying, hey, when I'm better, I want to reconnect. And so, we've got some other things that we're able to plan for. We're continuing to move ahead with our partnership with Children's Hope Chest. That's going to look different. That was one of our trips we had to cancel. We were going to go to Guatemala, and the border was shut down the day before the trip was set, the day before we were set to fly out. And so we're working with them to continue that partnership. We're hoping maybe do kind of possibly a virtual vision trip to establish a partnership with a community down there in the fall. They're talking about that. So, but again, we're able to do all these things because people have been so generous, and we're able to make a difference here in Monument all the way to the ends of the earth, which has been our vision for missions for these last couple of years. And so I'm grateful for that. The only other question, I know you're going to chuckle when I ask this, but the big question is, well, when are we going to get back to normal? When is that going to happen? So Bob, when are we going to get back to normal?
I'm happy to say that I have no idea. I am not prophetic in that sense. I don't know. And I don't know that we ever get back to normal. I don't think there is such a thing as normal. Things are always changing. So I think we kind of have to suspend that question and say, when do we move to the next phase, and how do we move through this systematically and in ways that we're really leaning into God and for Him to be our normal more than what's happening around us to be our normal. In the midst of all this, we remember that God is the one who is unchanging, the one who has us in the palm of His hand. I was studying Romans 8 for this Sunday, and at the end of that passage, Paul says powerfully, what can separate us from the love of Christ? Neither famine, persecution, nakedness, peril, sword, pandemic, nothing can separate us from the love of God. So that's where I'm leaning in right now. I'm not trying to make predictions or have target dates in mind for anything at this point. I think we just have to kind of watch that. But I think the other thing we have to continue to do is to look out for one another. Mm-hmm. And we live in a culture that is very self-driven, but Christianity is always other-driven. I posted something that my friend Jeff Greenway had posted about mask wearing, for example. And I remember many people in our congregation have served in the military. And if you've been in the military, that the priority of things happens in this way every time. It's mission, then the men, then myself. So whatever is my feeling, whatever is my right, whatever is my thing, always comes last. It's always about the mission first. It's always about the people second, others, and then it's about myself. And that's really the priority of Jesus too. The mission of God, the kingdom of God, ministering to others, giving yourself sacrificially to others, and then taking care of your own needs. So whatever you think about all of this, and whether it's political or however it goes, and I'm always amazed at how we can turn something so simple into a major problem. We tend to be really good at that. But to think about how is my attitude, how is my action, how is my life demonstrating that I have the priorities of Christ, that I'm seeing the mission, that I'm seeing others as more important than myself, that I'm willing to sacrifice even a little thing in order to be able to care for others. If we learn that out of this crisis, we will have learned quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And that will be a very good thing. I just pray that we have a different, it's not normal, but maybe it's how do we learn to live indifferent? How do we learn to live in this way that, I read an article this week that said that, the consumer church is dead. And, I think that's a good thing. I think there are a lot of things that this pandemic is doing. And, God says also in Romans 8, working things together for good. Well, they may not seem good to us, but it's God's goodness. It's God's purpose that things work toward. And maybe if this is the way that God retools the church and reorders our priorities, I'm giving away the sermon on Sunday a little bit, but maybe that's a very good thing for us to say, let's get down to the basics of the one thing or the things that we really need to lean in on that we have gotten away from because we've been so enveloped in what has been sort of the consumeristic or normal kind of way of thinking. So that was a really long, convoluted answer to your question, but there it is.
Well, that's, it's a tough question, and I appreciate the way you answered it. It makes me think about your message from last Sunday too. We're always wanting to live somewhere else. We either want to live in this past that sometimes I think we romanticize, right? Or we want to live in the future when things are going to be a particular way that we want them, and yet it's in that between two somewheres that we're at that God is present to us, and so I think that that's an important thing for us to do, is to be open to the present and what God is doing right now. And I also think with that question of, when do we go back to normal? I kind of want to say to folks, man, I hear the longing that's coming out of that question, that longing to be able to be together again, and that's really where that place is coming. And I know for me, one of the things that's been so hard about this is, I remember you and I would talk about, man, I can't wait till we get back together and it's going to be this big celebration in the sanctuary. And then when we finally get the opportunity to get back together again, well, you can have 23 people and you can't sing, right? And so it just wasn't what we thought or wanted it to be. And we thought it was going to be, hey, if we hunker down for a couple weeks, for a month, we'll kind of get past this. And it's lengthening out. And I don't think we were mentally or emotionally prepared, right? Like if I tell you, like when I do my Peloton workouts, right? They usually say the next 4 minutes is a hit section. And so I am mentally prepared for a 4-minute hit section workout. And that helps me mentally engage for that. If they tell me, hey, we're getting ready to do a hit section and it turns out it's going to be 20 minutes long and I'm not mentally prepared for that, that changes things. And so I think for all of us, just trying to, mentally readjust right now for, what this means, that this is probably going to linger on for longer than any of us wanted. And we don't know. So I think it's important to try to make that mental adjustment right now.
Yeah. Andy Crouch had an article early on in this deal about suggesting whether this was, a storm, a winter, or an ice age. And the longer it's gone on, I think we've got a mini ice age, just a longer season for us, kind of a Game of Thrones winter, if that can last for a long time. But I do think that things will be, I think there'll be a combination of things. I think one, we will get used to it and we'll adjust in new ways. And two, I do think that there are some innovations and solutions coming over the hill. Maybe not full solutions, but at least helping us to be able to manage things so that we can be able to be human again with one another, right. At some point, which I think is what people really miss. I mean, even being outdoors on Sunday morning, it's marvelous to see, half of people's faces, and to be able to talk to people out in the parking lot has been great. But I think everybody still acknowledges it's not the same.
Yeah.
What would be awesome is in the future, when we are able to gather, we can gather in the parking lot, but we could have a cookout out there. I think we'll do summer worship, like at least maybe once a month in the summer, even after this is over, because I think it's been really fun to do that. But imagine being able to do that with a picnic and with bounce houses for the kids after worship, or, something like that. It could be a real celebration. Right now it's what we can do. And I think it's been really great, but I think everybody would say whatever solutions we're doing, nothing we're doing right now is the way it should be. Right. I go to the gym and, even working out, everybody's kind of like looking at each other askance or staying apart from one another, or that guy's wearing his mask weird, or that guy's not wearing one at all, or that guy's too paranoid, or this is, everybody's kind of in this place of weirdness all the time. I mean, I have a friend of mine who said that he needed a shirt with small lettering on it. Says, if you can read this, you're too close. Like that's wow. Okay, we're in that place of weirdness. So, and we'll be there for a while. But you know what? God is good, and we're going to learn from this, and we're going to grow, and we're going to come out of it stronger. I really believe that God has some good things on the horizon for us. This has been an opportunity for us to kind of shake things loose and say what really is important. Mm-hmm. And I think we're learning what's really important, that people really are important to us, that we can't take them for granted, that our relationship with God, that our faith community is really important to us, mm-hmm. That the sacraments are really important to us, that there are a lot of tangible things in our lives that we take for granted. And so this has given us an opportunity to kind of be rebooted around that and say, yeah, let's reevaluate what that looks like going down the road.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. We certainly encourage more questions. We'll do this periodically as an opportunity to kind of communicate and let people know what's going on with us and what's going on inside the church. And we're really blessed to have all of you, and we look forward to seeing you either online or here at the church or in small groups or in meetings or wherever we happen to encounter you. We look forward to seeing you soon. We hope to see you Sunday, and we look forward to seeing you again here on Between the Lines. See you next time.
Take care.